Hi, Catherine Zuckert. Thanks to accept my invitation, and I want to talk with you about your book um, on Machiavelli thoughts and why uh, I because for instance I knew you about Strauss and during uh, during some years we have a conversation by internet about Leo Strauss and about the some attacks against him in France and so on. But uh, I when I read your book, I my first thought was it's just another book about Machiavelli because, as you said yourself in your introduction, several thinkers uh, wrote about Machiavelli. And I thought that why again a new book? But I understood it's not just any book. Is very interesting to me because uh, your book responded to some very questions I was asking to myself, especially when I read Leo Strauss and also Rousseau, uh, and also the other thinkers about Machiavelli. But in the first step, uh, when wrote to you in the email, um, and after I I have a discussion. I had been in discussion with Leah Greenfield. I don't know if you about nationalism
Yes.
and uh, Machiavelli for me maybe is not just a thinker about political science or founder, as Leo Strauss said, a modern founder of the political science to how to take the power, how to organize the power, and how to maintain the power also in the same hand. It's not just that. It's also a thinker about the idea of nation as a republic, as a politeia, in Greek acception is better than republican because it's not enough to think about this. And it's why my first question is do you think, as Rousseau said, Machiavelli is a great republican and not a monarchist as we thought in the first place?
Uh, okay. I think that Machiavelli is indeed a Republican. Um, I I agree also that Rousseau was a great admirer of Machiavelli, and even though I think in popular speech, Rousseau has a double face, at least in the English-speaking world. Some people used to connect him with totalitarianism. More people now connect him with an egalitarian democracy. And in a way, Machiavelli also has this double face. So in popular, Machiavelli is still associated with, obviously, Machiavellian politics. Chapter 18 of The Prince, Force and Fraud. But like almost all scholars or students of Machiavelli today, I think Machiavelli was not a Machiavellian. He didn't discover nasty politics. All the examples he uses in The Prince of how not to be good occurred before him. I mean, Cesare Borgia was before him, Gathlicles was before him, Severus was before him, Julius Caesar was before him. So Machiavelli didn't discover so-called Machiavellian politics, that is the use of force and fraud in politics and the necessity of that. In fact, in The Prince, he indicates that the ancients taught this, but they taught it kind of under the carpet. So he uses the centaur Chiron in Homer as showing that the ancient view was, well, the intellect on top, but the nasty animal, the bestial underneath. But Achilles and all other rulers, as Machiavelli said, needed to learn both the intellectual and the bestial.
Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt you, but you said the Machiavelli has a double face. It's why the post-Marxist like Althusser or also other thinkers like to think about Machiavelli. And also, in the other side, you have Carl Schmidt also, I suppose, because what is your response? Why this kind of thinker interest all the tendency of the spectral political thought? Why?
I think, so I would say generally, Machiavelli is of interest because, in my opinion, he understands politics. So people who are active in politics, whether acting in politics for religious reasons or acting in politics to remedy social and economic inequality, or acting in revolutionary politics, they can all see that he's talking about things of interest to them that they see in politics also. And so I think it's the depth and the breadth of his understanding of politics that makes him appeal to such a wide range of people with their different causes. Now, the result of that is the many Machiavellis, because people take different things out of him. So the Catholic first objected to his teaching how not to be good and his attacks on Christianity until that was the first objection. But then monarchists, Louis XIV, people in France thought, oh, Machiavelli got to kill people if they're opponents. He's teaching us how to deal with the Huguenots. So St. Bartholomew's massacre, Hegel saw in Machiavelli someone who described, in arguing for the need for unified Italy, someone who diagnosed all the problems of German politics 2 centuries before now, in the 17th, 18th century. Marx saw someone who saw class conflict. Lenin saw someone who saw the need for very powerful leadership, even when you are advocating popular causes. And that's been carried on. I mean, as far as I understand, Alve and Marxist or influenced critics, what they take out of Machiavelli primarily is his emphasis his emphasis on the fact that there is always conflict in politics. You're never going to get away from politics. And I think most of them now, and this is true in the United States as well as in France and Italy, at least in parts, what they also see is that the conflict in Machiavelli is not simply a conflict of economic classes. It has other dimensions. And in fact, as Machiavelli defines this conflict, you cannot have a political community, according to Machiavelli, without having conflicts. And he describes that conflict as being between two humors or desires. On the one hand, once you have a political community, you've got to have somebody who's leading it. And so then the question is, who's going to lead it? People who want to lead it, he calls the grandi, and in the discourses, the nobility, but they're the upper classes. They tend to be educated. They certainly are ambitious. From Machiavelli's point of view, what they want to do is to dominate and oppress. And then there are all the rest of the people who don't want to be dominated and oppressed. So it's this, shall we have rule, shall we not have conflicts? Because most people don't want to be ruled, don't want to be governed. If they had their way, they would have a state of anarchy, from Machiavelli's point of view. I think that part of it is often mixed, because a lot of contemporary commentators think Machiavelli is a partisan of the people. I agree, Machiavelli is partisan of the people, and I can explain why. But he doesn't think the people can rule themselves. He thinks that they need leaders, and they also need to be trained or educated. I mean, to conduct elections, for example, they need to be organized, need to be able to learn to use arms. So anarchy is really not, or no rule is not a situation. But the good situation is recognizing the conflict. And what some of I think the commentators today don't understand is Machiavelli sees if you just let this conflict go, you get civil war, class war. You can't abolish the grounds of that. What he recommends is you use the desire of the people not to be oppressed to check the desire of these ambitious people to oppress them. But on the other hand, you need to have those ambitious people competing. That's why elections are important, for popular support, which is what he argues is the only way an ambitious person who wants to be a political leader and stay in the leadership position can actually succeed over the long run. So you need the people to check great, and you also need the competition of the leaders to check each other. And they need to organize the people so you don't get situations of just riot or anarchy. Machiavelli sees that a mob has a lot of destructive power, but a mob can't govern itself, and it doesn't produce anything lasting. You need to balance these two poles, and he's interested in showing his readers that there is this conflict. It will have destructive consequences unless you manage it, and then you need to design all kinds of institutions and new ones all the time to do that.
But if I I understood, Machiavel wrote The Prince after the the discourse about Tite-Live Decade. He wrote after The Prince, no?
No.
Before? He wrote
Um,
before The Prince, before
so Yeah, so the first thing Machiavelli wrote are two poems that he
Mhm.
published, and they were the only things he published while he was in political office, working for the Florentine Republic. They're called the Decanali. And they talk about the destructive effects of French invasion and the importation of mercenary armies into Italy.
Mhm.
Um, but then when he was kicked out of office, he clearly had more time to write. And in a letter, very well known, a letter to Vittori, um, December 10th, 1513, he described writing a book that's called De Principatus, that sounds very much like, although not identical to The Prince as we have it. There's a lot of controversy about exactly when Machiavelli finished writing The Prince, not
Okay.
1513, but probably by 1516, just given the references. But then at the same time he started writing the discourses
Ah, yes, the same time.
was,
Eh,
was
My
yes, okay.
my second question,
Okay, sorry.
no, 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 it's okay. It's uh, sometimes Machiavelli is maybe near to Agrippa, to say the conflict is necessary inside the society between elite and people, senate and plebe, to make some progress in the law, in the interests of the people. But if you look about the Rome history, for instance, you have this kind of situation, conflict between Senate and the plebe. But in the end, the the Republic collapsed, and you have necessity to, you have the necessity to raise a dictator, a tyran, like in the ancient Greece before Pericles and so on. The the tyrant have a function uh, to organize the like you said, the new elite, the new thought, no, new organization inside the protesters and so on. The terror is not just a dictator; it's more complex. The terror, as, for instance, Caesar or Bonaparte in France also. You have this kind of figure of, but after that, after the tyranny or the dictator in the good acception, if you want, you have the next step. It is the absolutism. The absolutism, the sacralization of the tyrant become God. The tyrant become God, like in ancient Egypt, like in the Pharaoh, for instance. Like also maybe in communist country, or the leader become some expert, maybe not a god, of course, but they are inviolable, incorruptible. It's not possible to criticize because they, they knew the law of the universe, like Stalin or Mao, etc. Uh, just I will say maybe Machiavelli is between these two thoughts. For instance, he wants to reunify Italy, to Italy become a nation like France, maybe France become a nation, Spanish. uh, England, not German, but he wants in the hand to transform Italy in the nation. In the second hand, what kind of a regime it's possible to be able to reunify and to support, to mitral, to dominate the conflict. And I thought maybe the prince is a kind of response. Is not a, is not a tyrant. It's not like Baudin, absolutist monarchy, but between. I don't know if I you understand my thought.
Um, well, you can test me now.
Sorry.
uh, well, you will know whether I understood by my response, um, because Machiavelli insists on the need for leadership. But in the discourses talking about Rome and the Roman Republic, Julius Caesar represents the problem. And the problem is that you have the rise of a very popular leader who, he was very generous in dispersing goods and things to the citizens of Rome. And he's at the head of an army. That's what Machiavelli, and that brought down the Republic. So that's the situation. You need leadership, but then the question becomes how you get leaders without having them acquire this kind of complete power. Because he he wouldn't call it totalitarianism, he'd call it despotism. But it's a bad thing. That's the end of free government. And so Machiavelli praises the Roman Republic, but he says the Roman Empire destroyed freedom almost everywhere. So at least what I argue is going on in his discourses is he begins by praising Rome, partly because he's writing initially for an Italian audience. And in Florence, they wanted to become the new Roman, or have the new Roman Empire, to be like their great ancestors. And so he appeals to that desire of his immediate audience first. But then beginning in around chapter 28, he starts separating out. So what was good about Rome? It was good when they had lots of generals competing with each other for office. It's good to have elections, good to have competition, good to have short terms in office. Sometimes when there's a foreign threat, you can't afford that. So you need to have a very strong leader. And that's when they invented the dictator. The Roman dictator was good from Machiavelli's point of view because he was put into office for a very specific purpose, and he had 6 months term limit. After that, he was liable in court for what he did. He
But
couldn't be.
it's never finished. Yeah, it's very rare, no? I didn't remember, but all the dictators want to keep the power.
Right.
If
So
no,
most of the time we don't have an institution like the dictatorship in Rome. I don't think it exists in the modern world. And I think Machiavelli would, in the United States, for example, we don't have that kind of thing. We have war powers. They're supposed to be limited by Congress. They aren't limited by Congress.
yes,
So,
it's a balance of power. It's a
so
very new creation, a terrific creation, modern creation, a beautiful
so
tool of the modern system.
So,
But but
Machiavelli thinks, yes, leadership, but no tyrant. Elections, but even elections aren't sufficient because people make bad choices.
mhm.
So you have to have popular trials.
Like Germany in
Yeah, I mean, so what's quote Machiavellian about this is that he understands that these things don't happen easily. They don't happen every place, partly because most people don't understand the need for them. They think, oh, we can elect a great man and he'll lead us to glory. Or we can just have elections and they'll follow popular opinion. But politics is much more complicated.
Just a little question. And about Brutus. Machiavelli wrote about Brutus. Brutus has a right to what is the term? To put a term with Caesar to kill Caesar. Brutus has a right to kill Caesar for Machiavelli or not?
I'm sorry, right to what?
To kill Caesar, Brutus. When Brutus killed Caesar, what Machiavelli
So
thought about?
yes, there is a very harsh part of Machiavelli, which he has in both the Prince and in the Discourses. And that is, he does not think that people will give up extreme political power easily. That's why what we call rotation in office, or accepting the results of elections, is very, very unusual. And his only example was, I think, Rome. Most places, somebody comes to power, they become what we call an authoritarian leader, especially if they're military. Then how do you get rid of them? No way but killing them. So yes, he does endorse killing, or what he calls it, it actually goes back to Greece, cutting off the heads of tyrants, because there's no way of controlling them. So for example, early in the Roman Republic, when Brutus, overturned the rule of the Tarquins, he let them go into exile. Well, they conspired with the sons, so then he had to have his sons tried to kill. One difference would be that Machiavelli thinks a republic doesn't just go and kill people. You have to have legal accusations and trials. Even that's not perfect, but it's not terror. It's not mass killing. You need to use, he praises in the Prince, Cesare Borgia for bringing good government to the Romagna by bringing in all the old lords who used to pillage and murder the common people, having them tried and then killed by his officer, Ramirez Lorca. That created kind of fear. He thinks people need to fear the execution of the laws, and they need to see examples of it. So if you just let criminals go free or there's no penalty, then people start using violence. But Machiavelli insists, it's Machiavelli, so it's cruelty well used. You use it to establish force, but you don't use it again.
You don't use
You don't use it again. So
again.
So continuing terror that's bad, and what it will lead to anarchy eventually. So Brutus and Cassius weren't wrong to try to kill Caesar. They were wrong because they failed for various reasons to be effective. But you have to have some plan of what you're going to, how you're going to justify it. So one of their mistakes was letting Mark Antony get out and tell the people how great Caesar was and how much he had given to them. So then they went against the people who killed Caesar and supported the people who claimed to be supporting him, or and then Octavian. So yes, you have to have executions, but they have to be very limited, and they can't get you what you want, which is to have a limited government, not limited, sorry. What you need is a limited government, which is a government by laws, but laws don't enforce themselves. So you have to design the laws and institutions so the fighting parties balance each other. And you can't legislate all for once. You can't have actually Rousseau's legislator, like Purgus. That doesn't work from Machiavelli's point of view, because things change. So you have to change political institutions as the circumstances change. Yeah, this is one of my complaint about the people who are the scholars who emphasize just the conflict in Machiavelli, or they emphasize the conflict plus the need for a tyrannical leader. What they don't see is that violent conflict, and the use of force never generate kind of stable order. And you can't have liberty. People can't have the security they need in order to have families, to produce economically, to think that they themselves are going to be a part of the government. The conflict plus tyrannical leader doesn't generate that. And for people my age, the history of the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe illustrates that fact. For young people now, they don't know that history, and so they don't.
Yes. It's why you try in your book to insist about the complexity of the politics, but sometimes it's difficult to understand this kind of thing. But are you, maybe we can begin by what do you think about the Schmidt reflection, Carl Schmitt reflection about the politics? Friend against adversary or enemy, friends or enemy, is the distance, is a figure of politics for him. Uh, it seems that for Machiavelli it's the same in the way. Uh, you are against or for the Republic, and if you are against, it's necessary to fight against you. Like Saint Just said also, no liberty to the enemy of the liberty, for instance. And what do you think? Uh, Schmidt is the nearest thinker to understood Machiavelli, or it's not enough for you? It's superficial vision of Machiavelli.
So you mentioned the fact that I was a student of Leo Strauss,
Yes,
and he initially wrote a review of Carl Schmitt's The Concept of the Political, in which
yes,
he praised Schmidt's criticism of liberalism, but didn't think that Schmidt had actually gotten at what is the political. And I see that concern now. So Strauss has the concern, or thinks that liberal thinkers and liberal politicians have lost the sense of what the political is. And I think Pierre Manon, in his recent work, has picked up on that theme of Strauss's, the loss of the sense of the political. So I guess I would simplify by saying that maybe there are three different, at least, versions here. And all are not the liberal version, understanding politics as theoretically um, being based, or political community being based on contract. Um, and then that contract gives individuals rights. And so you have a very legalistic understanding of what politics is. And then politics is also only a small part. I mean, this is one of Schmidt's points. It's only a small part of life or human life. So, you know, they're the nasty politicians, and then there may be either the effete or the good intellectuals, and they're the people who produce. That is, there are a lot of other things going on. So politics is just a narrow piece. Schmidt, Machiavelli, Aristotle, Strauss, and then on, I think, but I won't add him. They all say, no, that's wrong. Politics, or the political order, encompasses all of human life. But they have different understandings of how that's the case. So for Schmidt, it's all, so he emphasizes the conflict, but it's all the conflict between the we, you know, our party, our class, our country, as against the they, who are subhuman. So that's how he could support the Nazi regime in Germany. And as you know, Schmidt is highly regarded and very popular with very liberal left people for that reason.
He's not a Nazi totally.
Yes, right. But I'm, and
he tried to influence the Nazi regime, but in Catholic way, conservative Catholic. He's like Cortés, Donosio Cortés. Do you know?
Yes, yes, he was a great admirer of his. Yes.
Yes. Cortés said also the democracy. Too much people talk always and never act. It's very necessary to have a strong
So,
mind. Yes. And also, the modernity is too individualist and so on. But it's
so that
Schmidt is very naive person. Maybe like Plato in certain way. No,
I don't think so, but
no, no.
I will take that up.
No, no. It's a joke. No, in the sort of the capacity to influence the prince. The philosopher has not the capacity to influence the prince in Syracuse, if you want. If you have not an army behind you. If you- but I'm not sure if Machiavelli has an army behind him in France.
He did not, but he thought to be an effective politician or political leader, you needed one.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just to have people behind you. It was also a way of training people to be citizens and obey orders. But what I was going to say is that Schmidt, at the end of his life, claimed that he was a Machiavellian, but I don't think he was, for the following reason. In the discourses, and I know this.
Tell us why.
In the discourses, Machiavelli analyzes a certain period of Roman history. It's the decemvirs, or the 10 men who were appointed by the Romans to recodify their laws. And I think it's very indicative of Machiavelli that these laws, that stayed for 1,000 years. They're famous for that. Machiavelli does not mention that at all. What he emphasizes is that the people gave these 10 men, in the end, unlimited power. They destroyed the previous constitution. And the reason that the people did this, and the Senate went along with it, and the decemvirs were able to exercise tyrannical rule, was that the Senate wanted to deprive the people of their power, and the people wanted to deprive the Senate of their power. And that's the recipe for not maintaining a republic. If you don't agree to if you're so partisan, what you're trying to do is destroy all the opposition. That will destroy all freedom. So Machiavelli did not subscribe to the we and the they understood in Schmittian terms. What he subscribed to was the need, and he actually thought this was something new that he was proposing, the need to construct and maintain a republic in which no part has absolute rule, but each part checks the other. That's the only way you get liberty. And he says, free government doesn't have any partisans because people just take the advantage for granted. Third option, which you mentioned earlier, Aristotle or the Greeks, the Greek polis, which is again a view that the political is the all-encompassing order. But the Greek view is first, Aristotle, that there's some people who are better suited by nature to rule other people. And so what you should do in politics is to elevate wise and virtuous men to rule everybody else. And Machiavelli doesn't think there are such wise and virtuous men, and he doesn't think that everybody else is going to accept their rule. But he would agree that the form of government determines all the other characteristics of society.
It's why maybe Montesquieu is very near to Machiavelli in this way, because the notion of virtue, the virtue is not just in the morality way, it's always the capacity to lead, to build, and so on. Yes, I understood just now. I remember when Montesquieu talked about some kind of regime, and he insisted about the virtue, and it's not the same way that some people said it's not the same way than Machiavelli, but I am very dubious about this because I said I am not sure it's very different about Machiavelli when Machiavelli talk about virtue is very nearest from Montesquieu. I understood better Machiavelli when I read your book and when I translate your book in French because we
That's a lot of effort.
yes, but precisely I am very astonished. I admire your capacity and your patience. Patience, what is the term in English? Your calm to meticulously uh, analyze very few details all the conception of Machiavelli, but also as you respond in events about some people who said, oh, Machiavelli is too simplistic thinker, or is, as you said, is too Machiavellian, and it's just a technique to take power and to keep the power. And you said, no, 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 it's more complicated of that, and you have many examples. It's very incredible for me.
Took a
You
long time.
you enter in some many examples. But why have you? It's like what is the term? It's like you are a painter in the Renaissance. Renaissance mini miniaturism. You miniaturize. It's very precise analyze. But
Oh,
why?
but you followed out one of the implications of my book that I didn't really develop, that I was thinking of developing, and that is, well, precisely the way in which Montesquieu follows from Machiavelli and takes much more than he lets on. from
Yes.
Machiavelli. There's an important
It's a
difference between.
precursor. Machiavelli is a precursor, I suppose. Because the balance of power, you said, it's Machiavelli thought about this in this work. It's why I said that.
So the main difference I see is that Montesquieu emphasizes the commerce as solving
Yeah.
some of the problems. So he objects to Machiavelli and the Romans because of the emphasis on land armies. Um, but
He
one
has
of
right. He has right in a certain point of view because, for instance, as Leah Greenfield said in the last interview, they said why United Kingdom win against uh, Spanish and France also is because the commercium, the idea of to possess the oceans, possess the armada, to the float, the capacity to protect the flow, the economic flow, and if you have the capacity to improve your army and also your situation in the world. It's why Montesquieu said you have an example for us, France. It's outside, it's front of us, front of your eyes. And Pierre Manon speak in this way. He spoke, he wrote, Montesquieu wants the France follows the, 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 the kingdom of UK, the UK. It's not UK, England. France must follow, but France refuse to follow. For instance, Bonaparte refuse wants to to maybe follow the same way that Rome and to have a strong army and strong, powerful army in the continent of Europe. And but in the other hand, Bonaparte develops the polytechnique, the science. But the Japanese also developed the military regime, developed the technical, the futurism in Italy, in Germany also. But no, I am very impressed by your book because in the first time uh, I um, I understood much the Machiavelli thought about the complexity of the human nature inside the political system. It's like Leo Strauss. When Leo Strauss spoke with Carl Schmidt in the Hidden Correspondence, he said the culture is the capacity to develop the nature of human being, and the political is the envelope, is the symbolic envelope uh, who not just limited our capacity, like Hobbes said, but like Locke said also, developed our ingenuity. And maybe Machiavelli is in this way.
I think he is. This is when I was thinking about this interview. It's one of the things that kind of surprised me, and I didn't emphasize in the book. But at the end of Machiavelli's discourses on living in book 3, he argues that different, he observes, everybody does, different nations or the people in them have different characters. So he says at his time, the French are always furious. That's what he's talking particularly about. So they rush out and attack, but then they don't have staying power.
Yes,
The Italians are totally disorganized, and the Romans, marched in order. But then what Machiavelli says immediately, and what he takes, and this is a theme in The Art of War also, he says, these things are not natural. It's possible to train. I mean, he uses exercises. It's possible to train people, not only in armies, but he starts with armies, to be regular, to keep order, to be courageous. So this isn't nature. And in fact, he says earlier that it's the princes or it's the political leaders' fault if you don't have any soldiers, so you haven't trained people. I don't think he goes so far as, well, no, maybe he does involve some manipulation, but people have to be trained to be citizens. And so the same thing is true of republics. People don't elect leaders just naturally. They sometimes, agree to them. You have to have institutions and people have to get used to them. So there's, I think you would say, socialization or acculturation. And this is one of the things that leaders have to understand. You both have to understand what the stage of your people is, what the culture, and adapt yourself to that. But you also can have a big effect. Politics can affect the culture. And I think that
is not a Rousseau problem also, the Rousseau problem? How educate the citizen?
Yeah, and see through Montesquieu, because Montesquieu picks up the importance of the mores. And then Rousseau says, end of part 1 of the social contracts, the mores are the real constitution of the people. And then Tocqueville, that's what keeps you free. This is actually one of the things I love about the French liberal tradition, as opposed to the Anglo-American. The French have emphasized the importance of customs and mores in forming a political unit, both as holding it together, but then the importance also of shaping and attending to them. And I also think this is going in a different, so I think that Montesquieu makes that more explicit, but there were roots of that in Machiavelli. And then what they have in common is the recommendation of a federation as a way that republics can have a defense against larger empires. And one of the things I do argue in the book is that Machiavelli looks forward to the desirability of something like the balance of power. So Machiavelli, I think, it's not just that he was diagnosing and seeing the need to establish a nation state in 16th century Italy, and then everybody gets one in Europe in the 19th and 20th century. Having these different bodies, nations, from Machiavelli's point of view, is important to preserve the liberty of any of them, so no one, like Rome, takes control of everything.
Yes, it's not about the diversity of the ethnic,
right?
Because it's always the universal perception of the rights, like the civil code, the law, the state, the law spirit. Yes, of
Yeah.
course. But in the end, now, why do you the Machiavelli um, thoughts now? What do you think actually? the tendency inside the thinkers as always the same, like 2 decades ago, reduce Machiavelli as just a modern tech, tech, technical scientist,
Mm,
or you thought it's you some thinker have more open mind about Machiavelli. What is your book in US? What is the comprehension of your book? Have you some discussion about your colleagues about your book?
um, yes and no, I would
Yeah.
say. So I would say that as far as I've been able to determine, my book was very well reviewed and received very positively.
Mhm.
Um, and I think the thing that people liked most about it was that I was able to show how not just the Prince and the Discourses, but all of his works added up to a comprehensive understanding, not just, you know, sometimes he's tyrant in favor of tyranny, and sometimes he's in favor of democracy, sometimes he's comic, sometimes he's, you know, a military technician. I could show that they all added up. Um, I don't have, well, as far as I know, I don't have a lot of followers, however, because what's become more prevalent in the understanding of Machiavelli in the United States is the, quote, democratic Machiavelli, or one associated with John McCormack, which is everything is class conflict. The grandi of the nobles are bad oligarchs. It's got a Marxist underpinning. And so what you need is you need popular revolution. There's a young man in Canada whose name is Ian Winter, who glorifies Machiavelli's description of violence, including the tearing of people apart in public squares. Um, in this all justified in the name of the people. And I don't think that that's a true picture of Machiavelli. I've been on panels arguing against that. I cannot say that I have won the day and decimated all of the opposition, because I haven't.
Yes. And uh, do you know is a little book from Machiavelli? The name is the woman and the take no the devil take the demon the devil take a
The
woman
demons, yeah.
take
And
uh, no it's a novel a little novel from Machiavelli. No,
Daniel Deronda.
ah yes
Yeah, George Eliot. Um, so I've read it. I've read it twice, but I don't remember it all that well. And I have to
me
say,
too.
Machiavelli is a very minor character.
Yes.
um, no, so there is a woman whose name is Erica Benner, who's a quite well-known commentator on Machiavelli, and I have argued with her and also in print. Uh, I think so. She argues that the prince, this goes back somewhat to Rousseau, that it's all ironic.
Mhm.
So he doesn't really mean all those.
Mhm.
And then she had a book that was published a couple of years before mine called Machiavelli's Ethics, and in which she argues, well, Machiavelli was really a Socratic.
Yes.
I,
But
I, I don't think so. So this it continues to be the case, and I think it will continue to be the case that because his view of politics is so complicated,
yes,
everybody tries to take what they want out of it.
yes.
You reminded me at one point, I'm not a student of Clausewitz, but apparently Clausewitz said that Machiavelli's prescriptions for the militia were realized by Napoleon Bonaparte. So Napoleon had the popular army that Machiavelli was recommending, but it's quite a bit later. And then Napoleon, though, became the kind of political leader that Machiavelli was worried about. He brought down the Republic.
Yes. And and now, what do you work about what now? You try to pursue the reflection about Machiavelli or not?
Um, so when I was working on the Machiavelli book, I had contemplated writing a second book on his successors, particularly in Europe, how Montesquieu and Rousseau and Hegel and Marx um,
Yes.
were that their roots are in Machiavelli, but I don't seem able to stay on the same track all the time. So what I am doing instead, I think, I'm trying to write a book that's very related to some of your research. The book I'm writing is on the historical search for self-knowledge. That is the question of what makes a human being human. And I think that the character of that search, or I'm arguing the character of that search and the answers that were generated was much different in antiquity. In Sophocles' Oedipus, Plato, or Socrates, and then Augustine. I see Montaigne as being the point of transition, actually. So this book is written partly against Charles Taylor's Sources of the Self. But for antiquity, there is a search for self-knowledge, but there's no such thing as the self. For modern, begins in Montaigne at Descartes, but I think it's formulated mostly by John Locke and then developed. There is such a thing as the self, and the question of what is human is defined with no regard to anything transcendent. But
I, you said human being and not separate to citizen is your thought? You want
yeah,
to analyze separately?
well, I guess it's, um, I think the project is to show why people keep asking this question. Why do people keep um, asking, what are we as human beings? What distinguishes us as human beings? If we are, after all, human beings, shouldn't we be able to answer this question pretty easily?
Mhm.
And then
Is not the same discussion in the ancient Greece between the strangers and the citizen? Who is able to be citizen? Who is able to be just human? It's not the same way, but it's more complicated. But in final sentence, do you think if Machiavelli didn't say in the Prince, uh, kill even the child of your opponent, maybe Machiavelli appears in the good figure for the middle, for the people, for the is more sympathetic if you want, because for instance, Lenin or Trotsky applied the same way to kill the Tsar and this, his children also, to and even to prevent all possibilities counter revolution. But if Machiavelli didn't written this kind of thing, maybe uh, it's very difficult to respond. Very because
Okay,
as a scientist, Machiavelli has to think all the situations. It's kind of chemist in the laboratory. You have to combine all the situation if you want to keep the power, but it's necessary to to keep the power in any way is the question. If you lost the power, you lost the power. What have you? What it's necessary to control absolutely all the capacity of the adversary to organize a counter attack. It's a question. Just
uh,
maybe it's linked with your new book about the human being.
maybe it's well, it's related because ultimately this is a question about what human beings are, and how human beings act. And so I think Machiavelli's defense of himself would be to say, yeah, those ancients recognized these nasty parts of politics, but they didn't talk about them in public because they didn't want to encourage people to go kill the Tsar. Um, but Machiavelli would say, well, people who want to overthrow that kind of regime
Ah,
have no choice, and they're going to do it whether I tell them to do it or not. So if you think that Leninists are dangerous, you should understand what they're doing and how they justify it in order to counter it. Just to pretend that the world is such that people don't do these nasty things is going to make you entirely ineffective. That's why he claims to be telling the effectual truth. I have so my trouble with Machiavelli, I could state in the following way. I think Machiavelli thought that politics was the most important aspect of human life. But I also think that his writing, particularly the print, has contributed to the very low view of politics in the modern world.
yeah.
We no longer political leaders is really great. They're subject to some
Uh,
criticism.
I didn't understand. I didn't listen to you. Maybe you are too far away to the micro.
Oh, sorry. Yes, yes. If I don't get closer to the computer,
Mm.
it doesn't go into the microphone.
Yeah, you said the French has a low.
So, as you know, I am a great admirer of Machiavelli and his political wisdom.
Yeah,
But I also think the view he has presented of politics as being rooted in violence, nastiness, and deception has also contributed to the very low view people living at our time have of politicians. And so it has ironically contributed to a view that politics is not important, whereas politics is clearly very, very important in
yeah.
ordering.
Yes, but when you said it's necessary to have a strong leader, maybe it's the complexity, the double. You said earlier, Machiavelli has a double face, and maybe all the human being has a double face, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, you know, and maybe the people, all the people, like maybe it's our animal side, our animal side, like in the chimpanzee and the lion, we are fascinated also by the powerful. And sometimes, like you can find this thought in the analysis, transactional analysis. The leader becomes the child you have to protect. It's your child. You are the child of the leader, and the leader is your child. You protect yourself. The leader is your mirror, and also he is able to make something you are not able to make. It's why the fascination become perverse because you give your power to be a man, to be a mensch. And it's very dangerous to give this kind of power to the leader, to be a mensch and not you, and not you. But I don't know if it's this kind of way you like to work, but it's my way. I try to understand why the people are so admirative about the powerful people, and is the other hand, as you said, it's necessary to have a strong leader, but it's very dangerous also. In tyranny system, it's why the balance of power is necessary to countercard.
So I think, unfortunately, that the emphasis on the power, partly just simple, for instance, this very little book, and the discourses is this long and rambling book, that Machiavelli's emphasis on power has overwhelmed a couple of other insights that he had. And one is it's necessary to have leadership, but you need different kinds of leaders in different circumstances. So the powerful leader who maybe can unite the people, especially in opposition to a foreign threat,
Like
that's good.
like Churchill, for instance. Churchill.
uh, but that's not good simply in itself or for all time.
Yes.
So then you need someone who introduces laws and religion and morality to make people less violent and more able to deal with each other every day. But then if they become too gentle, they can't defend themselves. So you go back and forth. That's one of the things. It makes Machiavelli's thought hard because he doesn't have a solution, or he's not a scientist that gives you the rules. Okay, you need a leader, and a leader needs to do 6 things. His books really aren't technical manuals
Yes.
because at the founding you need this, but later you need that, and when people become corrupt, you need something else. So it's always changing.
Yes. Yes, it's a good response, I suppose. The science evolute, improve itself. Okay, Catherine, it's, if you have another word to give to us, but when the French translation come up, I I make maybe another meeting with you, maybe to show.
I wish my language skills were better. That's all I can say.
But thank you, Catherine,
Thank you very much.
to share this kind of thing. And,
Au
and
revoir.
au revoir, au revoir, Catherine. Thank you.